Doug Glanville, former Philly, and now a part of the ESPN radio broadcast, which you heard Saturday and Sunday right here on 97.3 ESPN. And you'll hear him tomorrow, Wednesday, and hopefully not Friday. But if there is a Friday game, Doug Glanville will be on the call with Book Sciambi, and you heard it right here on 97.3 ESPN. Well, we saw Doug when we were in London. These two teams played, Doug, and here they are again. Oh, how different they are from the London matchups. But holy mackerel, what a game you were treated to yesterday. It had just about everything that you could ask for in a playoff matchup in Philadelphia.
Yeah, man, what a great game. And it was just an honor to be on the call because you just sit there and sometimes you just want to step back and just watch as a fan and enjoy it. I mean, I've known these teams my whole life as whatever player, fan, growing up in New Jersey, going to college in Philadelphia. And those two teams have just been interconnected in my life. So just had, like you said, everything, man, just, some great moments. And I expected nothing less because of the rivalry. You just have this long history that's never existed in the playoffs. And that's what's so head-scratching. Like, wow, these two teams never gone up against each other. That's really something. And the fan bases deserve this sort of pound-for-pound, punch-for-punch, and that's what we're getting.
Doug, a question for you about momentum and belief in a clubhouse. And as a former player, I'm kind of interested if you could speak to this. The Mets have had so many miraculous moments over the past, the past couple months, but even just the past few days. Does that kind of become contagious in a clubhouse where it's like, hey, you know what? We are going to do it. It doesn't matter what it looks like situationally. We are going to find a way. I mean, how do you explain? I don't want to take anything away from them from a baseball perspective, but it just feels like they have this magic about them right now up until, the ninth inning yesterday.
Well, I mean, look, belief is a big part of anything, let alone just playing at baseball where you have a team that's talented, and guess what? The team in the other dugout's really talented too. It's micro hairs that separate these teams, and that there's a lot of things that are out of your control. A bad bounce, hits the wall, hits the top of the wall, whatever it may be. So you try to hone in on something that's intangible, and a lot of it comes down to that team, that clubhouse. I know the Mets all season long has talked about being resilient. I've seen them at different stages early in the season. I saw them in London, saw them at the end of the year at September against the Brewers. And, you just watch this team build and gain that confidence. And certainly with the success of coming back. And I think Lindor is a big part of it, right? The table setter that just has that clarity about the greatness and the possibility. Lindor sets that tone. And when they moved him to that leadoff spot sometime in May, that changed everything. And I think one of the things he said to Carlos Mendoza is like, okay, I'll do this. I'll go to the leadoff slot, but it can't be just like 2 days and then you bring me back. You gotta let me ride this out and see what happens. And that turned out to be an incredibly wise move. And when you have moments of changing small things and then big things happen, and you watch how the Mets have had these big innings collectively, one after the other, you see that you start to think, well, we're never out of it. We're just never out of it. And the Phillies have that same story in many ways, of just how much they grind out and really work through things like Bryce Harper. And you could circle a lot of players on both sides of the field to say they have that extra something, and it's starting to become a cultural phenomenon with each team.
Doug Glanville, ESPN Radio's broadcast of the Phillies and the Mets. You can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. So Saturday, Doug, Wheeler's throwing a gem. He leaves the game with a lead. Obviously, they cannot hold the lead. The offense is ice cold. Yesterday, through half the game, the offense bringing nothing to the table. What finally kind of got this offense going? How were they able to finally get some runs across the board and carry some momentum to get them to the ninth inning in position to win?
It's a weird response, but part of it is their pitching, right? The fact is, if your pitching wasn't as good to match Wheeler inning by inning by inning, you'd look up, it'd be 7-0. But it wasn't. It was the fact that outside of the Schwarber home run in the beginning, there was zeros slapped up by the Mets. And I think as they kept going, they said, wait a minute, now we're just one swing away. We're just one swing, one bloop, broken bat. And you start to say, well, we're in this game. And what a steal that is to take one of the best pitchers in baseball and have him start a game and you come out with the W, even if it wasn't on his back. And so slowly they start to believe. And look, these teams played against each other so much in recent times. There's a familiarity. And what does that do for a hitter? Well, you feel pretty good. I know what this guy has. I don't care that he has a 1.2 ERA. I've faced him enough time to be able to make adjustments. And so the mystique of what is a great Philly bullpen isn't really there for the Mets, just like Edwin Diaz is probably not much of a surprise to the Phillies. So you kind of lose that pitcher advantage, so to speak, the matchup advantage that you look for, which is based on scarcity, right? That's how you're successful. Like, all right, I've never seen this guy. Oh, he has a forkball that's knuckles and it's twists in the wind and it drops off the table. If you've never seen it before, no shot. But when you've seen it a couple times, you know what it does. And so it's created this interesting equalizer effect between these two teams where the Mets have shown over and over again that they can get to these great bullpens. But it's no secret that they've gotten to these bullpens later in the year. Remember, they played the Brewers at the end of the season, and they said, okay, now we know what these guys have. And they played the Braves all year and got to Iglesias, which nobody got to. They got to Aspie and Payamps. They got to Devin Williams. They got to Strom. They got to Hoffman. They've gotten to all the – so, yeah, I mean, look, credit to those hitters and their approach, but also the fact that, postseason baseball, to do it at that stage at this moment, really says something about their resilience.
Doug, on the flip side, you got Philadelphia, the Harper at bat, the Castellanos at bats, the Stott triple. Is there an at bat in that game for them that kind of got their offense going?
Well, I mean, Trey Turner saw 5 sweepers when Severino was just on a roll. And you sense that if he threw the sweeper exactly in the same spot, he might have had Trey Turner again. But he hung it a little bit, and Trey Turner stayed back and was able to get on base. And then sort of things started to roll. I mean, Harper, big hit, that's a game changer. It just does something with the crowd. Just boom, everything changes. Even though they were still kind of coming back, that was a huge hit. And then Castellanos, who was, getting eaten alive earlier in the game, made adjustments in game. And when you have guys that can make in-game, in-at-bat adjustments, that goes a long ways, especially when a guy like Severino, who makes a lot of adjustments himself. Severino will pitch and then change things up. Okay, I'm going to start throwing my curveball now. I'm going to start, he's very in tune with what hitters are starting to time up on him. And so the Phillies got that going, and most importantly, from the bullpen standpoint, Diaz came in the 7th inning, and they were able to get to him. And these are all confidence boosts because they say, well, you could bring in your closer. Inevitably, really, nobody's going a complete game, right? I mean, that's just not what's happening. So you're going to have to beat a bullpen. And when you've done that, just like the Phillies, and it's gone both ways, now you feel like you're on par with each other. And that's kind of fun because you get back to 0. And so it's no secret why this is a 1-1 series, and wouldn't be shocked if it goes 5.
Looking ahead to Game 3, you get Sean Manaea going for the Mets, and he sort of reinvented himself a little bit this season. He's just a totally different pitcher and certainly much more effective. Can you talk a little bit about some of the adjustments he's made and why he's having this level of success, and maybe how the Phillies might be able to combat that a little bit in Game 3?
Sean Manaea he's really made adjustments. First of all, in the off season, he really, went to drive line, worked on his stuff, right? He tried to perfect. A lot of players these days go to centers and train under like the new technology, and they learn, really get a sense of self about how their pitching was last year, where they're at, and how they can get better. So I know Severino and Jose Iglesias, a lot of their players made that commitment. But I think the other thing, one thing that does is it gives him velocity. He was throwing 91 miles an hour, and now he was getting to 94. And the next thing he was able to do is he watched Chris Sale and that arm angle, and sometime in July he's like, you know what, let me try that. So it seems to be working for Chris Sale. So he went in and dropped down a few degrees, and that gave him a really different look, and he's been great since that point, really. I mean, he had a phenomenal September. And that was a big thing. And one of the big things he did, I talked to him just a couple of days ago pregame, and I asked him, I said, well, we're seeing that you used to get kind of run out of the stadium, but you kind of figured it out in your last start. What did you do differently? And he said, well, I held the ball, I quick pitched, I hold my leg up, and I just mixed it up. So I asked him if he does that, like premeditated. Does he do it in advance? And he said, no, I just change it up and keep them guessing. And it worked really well because that was a big weakness for the Mets in the beginning of the year. They were getting absolutely run out of the stadium, and they found a way to be better. And they did. They did it. They moved up quite a few slots in caught stealing percentage, partly in getting Torrens, all these things. So there's no doubt that Manaea is an example of that, of putting it all together, making in-season adjustments. And as I described the Mets starting rotation, it's old dogs learning new tricks. Severino didn't even have a sweeper or a sinker last year. That's one of the best sweepers in the game now. Sinker, fantastic, gives them a contact pitch. Guys like Quintana, guys like Manaea dropping down. I mean, Peterson, they've all kind of reinvented themselves, and they've done it in kind of, different later parts in their career. They're not rookies. So that's something to be said for how adaptable the Mets team has been. And no doubt the Phillies have done a lot of that themselves.
The Phillies made an interesting decision yesterday to bench Alec Boehm. I guess we can call it a benching, and he is, by all indications, going to play in Game 3. I guess a few different things. Number one, were you surprised that they went that route this early in the series? Guy had 44 doubles this year, and he has been struggling, certainly. He was 2 for his last 27 prior to yesterday. What do you think went into that decision? And then I guess the other part of it is, if you're a manager, how do you sort of walk the line between asking for urgency out of your club, but also not losing that player moving forward? I mean, you're going right back to him tomorrow. Is there any risk that you run in losing him, and further diminishing his confidence in the middle of a pretty rough stretch?
Well, I didn't call it a benching. I called it like a timeout. It's like, putting my, 5-year-old, they kind of, because they didn't really, he came in the game like 4 innings in. It was like, okay, you're free now.
Right.
No, I mean, we talked to manager Rob Thompson about it, and he said, look, trying to get him on track, of course, and you never know, does this backfire, but that's where you have to trust yourself as a manager to say, look, I'm communicating, I'm transparent. We have to win. We have to do everything we can. And right now you're not the best option, and maybe some of that is a little bit of like how he viewed him responding to things versus like, okay, the stats, but those things coming together just, Boehm has been frustrated and, because he wants to do well and he's had a great year. He was an all-star, RBIs, 97 ribbies, all these things he's done. And, so he wanted, and he mentioned that Sosa coming in. Sosa's like an energy guy. He's the guy you kind of put, he's like Iglesias. He comes in and he brings a lot of energy and passion, and they wanted to just give that a shot. So, that's what you do. And sure, any player could be affected a lot of ways from those things. But in the postseason, this is sort of what kind of exposes you for better or for worse. And, if Boehm's like, I quit on the team, I'm going to pout the rest of it and I'm done, that's still going to be more of a reflection on him. Now, if he comes together, shines, does what he has to do, and, I saw him out there hitting early again in his ski cap and taking ground balls at third base, putting in the work, that was positive. He didn't go and say, well, I'm not doing that. He came out early and got some work in. So there's teams that have guys that if he's playing well, you're just a better team. They're better with Alec Boehm playing Alec Boehm baseball like he did across the season. Just like the Mets are better with J.D. Martinez in the lineup when J.D. Martinez is at his best. And that's why he's gonna make the roster even when he was 6 for 55 in September. Like they need these guys, and they have to do whatever it takes to get them going, including shock them, bench them, and do whatever it takes to get them on the right track. And, the managers need to be in tune with their players to know what works.
Doug Glanville, ESPN Radio's coverage of the Phillies and the Mets continues tomorrow. Doug, you just watched Bryson Stott hit that triple, huge moment in the game. He has struggled against lefties. Do you move Sosa to second, or do you anticipate Stott is back in the lineup tomorrow?
That's a good question. And, there's a lot of ways you could look at it. Sometimes it's not just lefties across the board or righties. It's the kind of righty, kind of lefty. They have the certain kinds of stuff that they say, okay, Manaea actually is harder. He's tougher on righties. I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me. I believe it was 190 that righties hit off of him this season. Lefties did a little better. So it might be a scenario where, you watch a guy like Bryce Terang, who was in the Brewers. That's kind of a Bryson Stott kind of match, a guy who can, make contact, slap the ball around, and run. So if there's a lefty that he might get a start against, it probably would be a Manaea. And because Stott gives you some D, you can really run. And some of it is also matchups later and like who do you want to come off the bench against who. If you're thinking about looking at the Mets bullpen, that's also going to be a factor. So that's the good news is they have pretty good options. I mean, Sosa, look, he's such a key X factor for the Phillies because he's got a lot of power. You watch him take batting practice, man, this guy, center field, right center field. I feel like if Sosa got a chance to get 425 at bats in a year, and he continues to work on things, he might get his strikeouts. He's going to swing, but he's going to hit 25 home runs. So they have that's a nice that's a nice player to have on your bench and be able to flex his way in.
Doug, you played center field. The Phillies have a center fielder who is excellent defensively. Would you stick with Rojas in the lineup, or do you look for more offense as this season goes on, or do you like having that security blanket in center field with Johan Rojas? If you're Rob Thompson, are you sticking with Rojas, or are you going with more offense?
Well, they've stuck with him. I looked at it last year when they played the D-backs, and you know what you're getting. And look, Ross, it's not like he's hitting like 105. He hit 240 or so during the season. He's not going to hit for a lot of power, but he is a really good base stealer, and he gives you defense. And I think the matchup will dictate if you want to start off defensive-minded and know that you could bring in someone later if you have a certain, depending on how the game goes, you could move Marsh over, who I don't think is as strong in center as Rojas is, but Marsh is a really good left fielder. So you do have those options, but it's like a matchup thing, lefty and righty, but you know what you're getting. And if Rojas gets, a couple hits, that's definitely a bonus. But, you think of it this way, you have Real Muto behind the plate, and that's a catcher that's an offensive force in many ways, right? He can run, he gives you a lot. There's a lot of teams that have catchers that hit like 180, 170, there's a good amount of catchers out there, but they like what they do in managing the game. And there might be a situation where you say, okay, I got a pinch hit for this guy and bring someone else in. Rojas is kind of in that boat. And if their offense is like clicking like it did game 2, you feel a lot better about having a defensive-minded center fielder.
All right, the last one we got for you, Doug, is Nick Castellanos, who has last year in the division series against the Braves, he carried the Phillies in that series, and then he went ice cold in the series against Arizona. But have you seen the change of approach from Castellanos to think that streaky version of Nick Castellanos is behind him?
Absolutely not. Nick Castellanos is that's what Philly loves about Nick Castellanos. He's Nick Castellanos always. That's unapologetically Nick Castellanos. That's who he is. He's swinging at the first pitch. He's looking to swing. He's streaky. And because the beauty of his streakiness is when he's streaky hot, he's absolutely one of the more dangerous players in the game. I mean, I say that because of evidence, right? I was working in Chicago when they traded for him, and his numbers were he had Mike Trout numbers after that trade. Like, he was that good, and that was Trout at his best. So that's a long stretch to be like Mike Trout. If you're Mike Trout for like a couple of days, you're feeling pretty good. So we had like a second half like that. So yeah, he was a younger version of him, but but you saw what he did. Like they kept working their way around Harper to get to Castellanos, and he was like, "Wait a minute, you're slapping me in the face right now." So home run, base hit, gets on. He made his adjustments. But yeah, is he going to swing and chase? Absolutely. But that's the whole team That's the Achilles heel of the Phillies. If they chase, get in trouble, that's where they can spiral. And it's sometimes a function of everybody kind of trying to do too much, right? You're expanding, especially when you have capable guys that know how to stay in the zone, like a Bryce Harper. But Nick is the X factor, and I do think there's a version of Nick as an X factor that's a champion. There's a version of him. And, they just have to have everybody else support that. And you just know that there's games he won't be there offensively, and you hope that the rest of the team does their part.
All right, tomorrow, right here on 97.3 ESPN, you'll hear the coverage starting at 5 o'clock. Book Shambi and our guest, Doug Glanville, will be on the call Tuesday, Wednesday, and if needed, on Friday. You can listen to all 3 games on 97.3 ESPN. Doug, always great to catch up with you, man.
All right. My pleasure. Great to be on. I'll catch you the rest of the postseason.